Welcome to the Book Blast podcast, in which we talk with writers, translators and publishers about their work and influences. We've exclusively interviewed world-renowned authors Taha Benjeloun, Lars Mitting, Tommy Waringa, translators Natasha Lehrer and Jamie Lee Searle, and publishers Christopher MacLehose and Philip Gwyn-Jones, among many others. Today, I'm delighted to be interviewing the award-winning novelist, short story writer, poet and educator, Abdourahman Waberi, whose latest book to be translated into English is Why Do You Dance When You Walk?, published by Cassava Press. Hello, Abdourahman. Bonjour. Thank you so much for doing this interview.
Hello, Georgia.
Why Do You Dance When You Walk is a compelling and at times disturbing portrait of growing up in a shanty town of Djibouti when it was still under French colonial rule. Your mother was neglectful, your father hard-working and distant, your loudmouth younger brother, as you put it, was the family favourite. The bullying you endured at school was remorseless and inescapable. Only your grandma was truly there for you. Were these early experiences helpful at all for developing your writer's drive?
Surprisingly enough, the kind of ordeal that you have in the childhood make some of the best tools that you can use when you are growing up. So you say, actually, this is my first autobiographical book because I have been, let's say, writing from and taking testimonies and so on. So what we call the grand monde and the outside, the big outside. And now that I'm above 50-something, I'm coming back to my core, and so I'm dealing with the intimate questions, issues that I have been kind of hiding or avoiding my whole life. So the question of disability, body malformation, and so on. So it took me a while, and one of my daughter, my third child, was nagging me and saying, Papa, why? Because she was having information like, you cannot ask your father to do this or that. And like this and that being, he cannot ride a bicycle, or he cannot go skiing on a ski station. So don't ask him, right? And so I just say, maybe now it's time that I come to the full circle. And I tell this daughter why I am dancing when I'm walking, and where came my, what we call in French, my danse chaloupé, my swing. Yeah, my swing, yeah. Yeah, so then I just that is the point. And then from then on, I was just also showing photographs and saying, this is your grandma, this is my mother. So it's a way of basically coming home and talking about my body and also reconnecting with family. And also at the same time, making alive again the shanty town of Djibouti, which was my playground when I was 6 or 7, some 50 years or so.
When Bea, therefore your beloved daughter, who was the one who was asking you, Papa, why? When she was very ill at the age of 6 and was bedridden, it must have been particularly distressing given your own childhood experiences of being bedridden because of getting polio or poliomyelitis. So is this book also in part a response to this traumatic event as well as what you've just explained?
Yeah, it's a kind of double trauma coming in. Yeah, so then my daughter was diagnosed with this, juvenile, they call juvenile arthritis. And so because I have been hiding that, and we are not, even till now, we're not sure if it's coming by the blood, if I'm transmitting it, or if it's just bad luck. But anyhow, yeah, my childhood was coming back. And so we were kind of, at almost the same age, at the same station of life, and having the same ordeal. So it makes us come closer. And I have used it purposely to have the voice of my novel, the one who was pushing me to, allowing me to write. And actually I have done another novel that more recent, which is the other part of the story, narrate from her point of view, meaning from her own illness. So the two books are about the question of illness and resilience and coming to terms with overcoming the difficulties as such.
Your frail condition at birth and getting infected by polio after a particularly vicious attack at the hands of your chief tormentor and bully in the school playground fueled the general view that you were off to a bad start. Yet, You write, "If I had a crazy leg, as they said, I did not have broken wings and still less a rusty brain." How did you develop such a constructive attitude and stay so strong?
Yeah, actually, it came progressively, let's say, but because polio came at age 7. And then I will have another trauma maybe at 7 years later, at age 13, when I was kicked out of the playground because I love to play soccer. And since we're growing up, when I was 13, 14, my fellow players just say, Abdou, you cannot run fast. So you may try to be a goalkeeper, and then I couldn't be good enough, and so they kicked me out of the playground. And then I say, okay, done. I will read. I say, to hell soccer, So I developed my inner life, what I call my interiority. And actually I became female because I was playing with the girls, because some of the girls were readers, avid readers. So I moved from one group, the bulliers, the football players, what we call now the male toxicity, kind of, the male toxicity, to the realm of the women, and the girls, because they were reading at that time, what we call le livre d'amour, or those, $2, not 2 cents, stories about romance. We call that Harlequin also, collection Harlequin.
Oui, Mills and Boon, c'est l'équivalent en Angleterre, c'est Mills and Boon, Harlequin.
Yeah, okay, we were reading, so I was buying their Harlequin, and then and I became a reader, and then I moved from those Harlequins, I moved to the bibliothèque, the library of the Institut Français, which was the closest library that I had, which was 3 kilometers away. So I was walking there, and then I was getting the books, and beginning with the comic strips, and then finishing at the philosophy rank from Achille Talon to Wittgenstein. So I became a reader, and I became also someone who's the eyes was turned inside me, kind of.
So how has being from Djibouti at the intersection of the Arab Islamic world and Black African world affected some of the key themes in your writings of nomadic culture and urbanization, oral storytelling, and the language of the colonizer, for example, and also you've got environmental themes?
Yeah, it was hybriding all those, coming together. As you said, the cultural side, the African culture of Somali, because I'm a Somali speaker, in Djibouti you have two cultures, let's say Arabic, which is additional, but you have 2 African cultures, Afars and Somalis, and then you have the Arabic element coming from the religion, but also from the diaspora, like in East Africa, I'm here in Mombasa, you have people coming from Arab descent, Yemen and Oman mainly. Then you have the culture. So the culture of the local culture, the African culture, was coming through my grandma, as I said, which was a beloved character in the novel, Grand-mère Cochise. So that is one pillar, if you will. And then the second pillar is coming from the French language, in which I was schooled. And then I read it, as I said, from the Harlequin to Victor Hugo and the classical and so on and so forth. So I was making my blending culture, my shantytown boy culture, mixing kind of, the French of the school and the traditional storytelling of the grandma.
So tell us about your old uncle Aiden and why the discovery of his notebooks was such a significant moment for you.
I was trying to use the figure of the scripture, the writer. In Arabic, you say katib. So my father was actually writing, but he was also writing his figures because he was a small businessman. But he used to write stuff. So I have seen my father just, faire les additions. But he was not really a writer. So I invented this character who was Aden, who can be a kind of will-be, someone that I was dreaming of. So it's the figure of the secretive, alone, someone who is just, talking to himself and writing something. And so I was fantasizing.
By writing about flawed characters in Why Do You Dance When You Walk, you remind us of our shared humanity. Which characters do you hope your readers will most empathize with?
I believe the grandma, because she's in the West Indies culture, they call that potomiton. She's in Afro-diasporic cultures, you have someone who is, the core of the family. And my grandma, that her nickname is Cochise, like Cochise, the Indian chief. She was the boss of the family. So I knew from experience that even if I was from what they call patrilineal family tradition, the boss was the grandma. He was not my father. My father was kind of, absent and someone who is coming in between. And my mom, she was really afraid because her first child died in a childhood, in a very... So she was so afraid of losing me because I was weak and feverish. And so she was putting me in the hands of auntie. And so this grandma was saying, oh, you're killing these kids. Give me to me. And she was the savior and the core of the family, the rock.
So moving to France in 1985, you leave the confines of this narrow world forever, and at the age of 22, you celebrate your birthday for the first time. For some writers, leaving their homeland engenders a sense of loss, while for others, exile can be a source of creativity. How has it been for you?
And it's both, for so long I was suffering with the loss of the country. So I was even saying that my first three books were a kind of giving back to them, So I make the first trilogy coming from Djibouti in French. There were two short story books, Cahiers Nomades, Pays Sans Ombre. Actually, you published one of them, one of the stories. Yeah, and then I made a novel that was called Balbala. So by these three books, it was a way of paying back and saying, now I can be allowed to be a kind of Frenchman, for example, or I can be a global citizen, what they call that. But so that the three books were my way of just curing and healing the loss. And then from then on, I might say I'm also an African in France. But the loss became not a gift, but it became a way of living, let's say, a way of coping with the world.
So how did writing the chilling novel Harvest of Skulls, set in Rwanda 4 years after the genocide, come about?
Well, actually, when I did the three books, I was ready to go to the world, right? To do the world out there, not Djibouti, but everyone else, everything else. And then broke out the genocide of the Tutsi in Rwanda in 1998, 4 years after the Tutsi genocide. We went to Kigali and Rwanda, meaning a group of writers, African writers, just in a way of sharing our grief with the Rwandan, and also kind of, documenting, also bringing back putting the genocide of the Tutsi in the discussion, as we said, in places like Dakar, Djibouti, or elsewhere. So that is, I haven't written a novel. It's a cluster of short story and essays. It's because I was not able to write really a novel. So this came out actually, and I'm still connected with Kigali and the Rwandan capital and the country. But something have been, for me, it put me on another stage, not as a success, but as a human being. I became aware that writing is serious because one of the genocide, what make also the genocide possible was also writing, because a genocide is a text. And so when all the justification, which will be the outcome, will be the killing of people, it's intellectual. So it allows me to understand that writing can be on both sides. So it makes me be more aware of my trade and my craft, if you will.
So actually, why is the past important?
Because we are human beings and we cannot. Past is informing the present. So we usually think that there is a linear, and we have past, present, and future. But in reality, let's say, I don't know what's the reality, but we can only experience present time. And so present time is made of a past actualized or forgotten or dreamed of on another. The dedication or the desire are projected in what we call the future. So we just live in a time that is the present, and then we kind of make sense of that using what we call past and what we call future.
The influence of the environment on people is a consistent theme in your work. In Why Do You Dance When You Walk, there's a superb description of a cyclone which devastates the city and brings death in its wake. What can East African ancestral wisdom and culture teach us about the risks of becoming a lost civilization unless the impact is addressed of an increasingly man-made and exploitative world dependent on technologies that threaten the environment? And this is coming from the West, really, Western technologies particularly that threaten the environment.
Yes, that is really one of the deepest questions that we have ahead and now, actually. For instance, people were seeing as, for example, the landscape of the desert and the desertification as something that was coming from as a doom, as a fate. But now we know this is the product of a system. So it's not bad luck. It's not drought is not a bad luck. So what I can take from my culture, what the nomadic people of Somaliland and Somalia and Tuareg people also, they can make us feel that we are not in the realm of the unfinished. In the realm of what Marx will call the product. The realm of the product. We are in a finite system. So for example, the lack of water. We don't have water forever and for everything. So we have to make what we call sometimes the croissance, or a useful reutilization of the resources we have. So we can use those knowledge, indigenous knowledge on how we deal with the resources, basically.
Much of your work is like an impressionistic mosaic, revealing a land overwhelmed by epidemics, famine, corruption, and conflict. One example being the tough novel Transit, in which the characters land at Roissy-Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris as refugees from the civil war that erupted in Djibouti in the 90s. Some novelists are notoriously shy, while others are very much public figures. Where do you think the writer's place is in public life if he or she is to have such a role?
I don't. So as you have seen, as you have said, I'm those who are thinking of the belief that a writer also have responsibilities in the society, and especially when you come from places like Africa, Asia, and small countries, difficult situation. For example, my friend Jean-Marie Leclésio doesn't have this kind of, some European writers can take, the task of just saying, I will be in my tour isolation. But I think that we nowadays, the environmental issues put us in the same place. So I have been always an active kind of activist, some of what I call engaged citizen. And I believe now nowadays we cannot have the resources of just being, or let's say, put it a different way. Howard Zinn, the historian, say you can be neutral in a running train.
When you called for a boycott of the presidential election of outgoing President Ismail Omar Guelleh in 2005, it caused an outcry. Are you able to return to your country of origin?
No, sir. No, madam. I have been in exile since, physically, because I used to go back to Djibouti even if I was not living there. They were a kind of modus vivendi previously, Don't talk too much, but you can come and visit your mom. Nowadays, this has changed. Since 2007, I have not set feet in my country of birth. So, but time changes. So I'm just waiting for the next, let's say, state of relationship with my country.
Now, which authors inspire you? Is there one in particular who you'd say influences your writing and interests most of all?
Yeah, it depends on time. It depends on age. It depends on. I was a close friend to many people that now became, the foreground, and some of them were even Nobel Prize winner. I became friend to Annie Ernaux, who's the Nobel Prize of today. So, and also to Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who's maybe doesn't even need the Nobel Prize to be well known, right? And so my friends and my, let's say, tendencies and my attraction goes from Annie Ernaux to Ngugi wa Thiong'o. And there is a gulf between the writing of Annie Ernaux and the writing of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, right? But I'm okay with both, because Annie Ernaux is giving me the close inside look on, for example, femininity, the question of intimacy, and Ngugi wa Thiong'o giving me the large scope, what is the effect of or the misdeeds of colonialism on Africa, for example. So the large scope from Ngugi wa Thiong'o, the small scope or the microscopic scope from Annie Ernaux.
Yes, so Djibouti is a gateway to the Suez Canal. Is colonialism a thing of the past? Or has it just changed faces, if you like, in the 21st century?
No, it's the same. Yeah, it's the same drink with a different bottle, right? Because we used to have what I call the tête-à-tête, the dialogue between France. But nowadays, Djibouti became a hub. We have a military hub, which is actually difficult to conceive and to grasp. But we have a military basis from the US. We have the first actually military basis, the biggest military basis of the US on the African continent. You may have, 10 big military bases from 10 powers. France, US, China. We have the biggest military bases, Chinese on African continent. Djibouti again. You have small places, Italian, Japanese have also, because Japanese were, of course, very careful about, the port and, the sea, the maritime traffic. So they also have a base. So Djibouti has become a hub of bases.
But isn't there quite a debate, in inverted commas, going on about Francophone being a bit patronising?
In my daily life, I don't even care about label. I have been labeled African writer. Once I was dreaming to become the Black Norman writer. That was my dream when I was living in Normandy. In French, we use the Francophone, which is grasping all this, And even now we have Black French writers, Afro-descent writers from French language. I know to navigate all those labels, and I'm all of them. Francophone is, let's say, a lessening definition or concept in Europe, in France, for example. And so if you are a Francophone, you better say, no, I'm not Francophone. I want to be a French writer as such, But for example, in the US academia, Francophone is cool. If you're teaching in Columbia or NYU, it's all about the location, So Francophone can be worldly or global in some places. And even in Paris, if you are in the edition or in the press or in the academia in Paris, you may say Francophone is lesser because in Paris you're having the imperial gaze, But if you are in Columbia or NYU, you want your students to be Francophone because that means global. So this is what I call navigating. So it's cool to be Francophone in NYU, and it's not that cool to be Francophone in Saint-Germain. Especially in Paris, especially in the world of publishing.
Yes, so as a professor at George Washington University, do your academic and your creative activities coexist quite easily?
But I have a unifying mind, if you will. So it's not Georgetown, it's George Washington University, which is actually the on the other side of the bank it's a mile away from Georgetown. But anyhow, I'm from George Washington University. So in my discipline, I teach Francophone and French literature, but also a bit of creative writing. So for me, it's just, it's coming together. Yeah, it's coming because my students, I want them to be, for example, attentive to the world. So if they want to go to, let's say, Dakar or Morocco, I'm the Francophone teacher, or I'm the French/Francophone study faculty teacher. And if they want to be a writer, I'm the writer. I can give tools them, not only to write creatively, but also to write better their thesis or their papers. So I'm for them, and I can use both sides of my brain, if you will. Basically, if I can come to just one definition, I'm helping them to read better or more profoundly.
For any aspiring writers, therefore, is there a particular piece of advice which you would give to them? This is also slightly with your book in mind, because you give some quite good little tips at the end. I'll let you expound on that a bit.
Yeah, but as I said, all my life I've been reading and writing. This is how I came out of the shantytown. If you come to the early stage of a discussion, going and finding books even of poor quality, but just to get it out of your body when you're not feeling at ease in your body, and then to freeing your mind. So the act of reading and writing became a liberating act. So first, just read indiscriminately, and then when you become a reader, you will find your own way through the reading process. And writing is the same thing. I was using what I call the short format, but for the sake of practicality, I was writing short stories because I was able to then put on competition or maybe in anthologies and then have it published. So it's the same process, finding your own path, breath within the process. And as we say in the Buddhist tradition, the walk is the work.
Well, actually, what that is interesting in your book, because there's your wonderful grandmother who sounds like a wonderful character and supportive and everything at home, but actually at school you did have some very nice French teachers. So that was a rather positive side. One doesn't always hear that the colonial, you had a very good, it's French-based education, but they obviously, there were two French teachers who were very supportive. So talk a bit about them, because they were quite different, your French teachers.
Yeah, Madame Annick. I'm still, even in my, not only in my fiction, but even in my public intervention, I make clear that colonialism is a complex situation. And we, the product, what we call post-colonial or whatever you call it, we also are in this place. You can blame colonialism for many things and many evils. But they also bring, for example, for me, as you said, public, free, humanitarian, let's say, enlightening school. For example, in the US, I'm teaching with a PhD that have cost me anything because I'm a product of the French system. And we know how much a PhD costs in not only in UK, but in Canada and the US, right? So this side of the colonialism is the good side. And this indiscriminate also use of the language they give me that I'm using now creatively. I also pay tribute to what I call les barbichets de la Troisième République, the myth of the French Republic, bringing enlightenment to everyone. You can say, of course, it's patronizing, it's colonialistic, of course. But it's also kind of generous, I'm just saying, giving it to each and everyone, The French colonialism have had also some mythology that is crazy, and at the same time liberating, and have been liberating in the past. So what we call Francophone is the product of this dilemma.
We are increasingly dominated by new media and instant communication through the internet. How do you see the role of the novel evolving in this new world we live in?
I am not also a technophobe. I use technology as I can. And as a human being, I'm a unifier. I don't see I say sometimes I'm blind to the differences. For example, in religion, I'm a ecumenistic kind of. I see, okay, I was born Muslim, but I find Muslim culture is great, but also I'm not saying the dogma, but the culture of Judaism is great, the culture of Catholicism is great. So I'm in the cultures always. I'm the unifying. So with the technology, it's the same thing. I have seen people writing novels with a pace of a tweet. I'm not recommending that, but let's say technology is also giving us some tools. Of course, nowadays it's retaken because the era where we're imagining that the internet will liberate everything is now gone. But anyhow, we can use Twitter differently, and technology can be also useful in some cases. I'm just want people to read and write and to be engaged with one another, and you are in the business, so I don't need to say that because I know you, Georgia. This is the stuff you're doing for years now. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdourahman Waberi, for your time and invaluable insights. Could we finish with a short reading from Why Do You Dance When You Walk in French and then in English?
Abdourahman Waberi, pourquoi tu danses quand tu marches? Chapitre 1. Tout m'est revenu. Je suis cet enfant qui nage entre le passé et le présent. Il me suffit de fermer les yeux pour que tout me revienne. Je me souviens de l'odeur de la terre mouillée après la première pluie, de la poussière dansant dans les raies de lumière. Et je me souviens de la première fois où je suis tombé malade. Je devais avoir 6 ans. La fièvre m'a fouetté toute une semaine. Chaleur, sueur et frisson. Frisson, chaleur et sueur. Mes premiers tourments datent de cette période. Un petit matin à Djibouti, au début des années 70. Ma mémoire me ramène toujours à ce point de départ. Aujourd'hui, mes souvenirs sont moins embrumeux parce que je suis déployé des efforts pour remonter le cours du temps, remettre un peu d'ordre dans les fatras de mon enfance. De jour comme de nuit, la fièvre m'assaillait, des orteils à la pointe de cheveux. Un jour, elle me faisait vomir. Le lendemain, je délirais. Je me méprenais sur les mots et les soins que mes parents me prodiguaient. Je jugeais mal leurs gestes. La faute en incombait à la douleur et à mon tendre orage. La fièvre a joué avec mon corps, comme les filles de mon quartier avec leur unique poupée de chiffon. 6 jours et 6 nuits durant, j'ai tremblé. J'ai déversé l'eau de tout mon corps, tout l'eau de mon corps, allongé sur ma natte le jour, puis sur mon petit matelas posé à même le sol le soir. La température grimpait à la tombée de la nuit. Je pleurais des plus belles. J'appelais maman à la rescousse. Impatient, je bouillonnais de rage. Je n'aimais pas quand elle me laissait tout seul, sous la véranda, les yeux fixés sur les toits d'aluminium. Je pleurais jusqu'à l'épuisement. Enfin, un moment arrivé, mais je ne trouvais plus le moindre réconfort dans les bras de ma mère Zahra. Elle ne savait pas quoi faire de moi. Une décision vite, réclamait la petite voix qui s'emparait d'elle dans ces moments de panique. Alors, elle confiait les petits sacs d'os et de douleurs que j'étais à qui s'est présenté devant elle. Qui fait vite implorer la petite voix. Alors, elle me lançait comme un vulgaire paquet dans les bras de ma grand-mère, ou dans ceux de ma tante maternelle d'Aïbo, qui avait l'âge de ma mère, ou dans les girons d'une bonne qui passait par là, puis dans celle d'une autre femme, une tante, une parente, ou une bonne, ou encore une voisine, ou une matrone venue saluer grand-mère. J'ai passé ainsi de bras en bras, de poitrines en poitrine, mais j'ai pleuré toujours, des douleurs, des colères, par habitude aussi.
My first torments date from that period. The small hours of a morning in Djibouti at the beginning of the 70s. My memory always takes me back to that starting point. Today, my memories are less foggy as I was able to make strenuous efforts to go back in time and put some order in the jumble of my childhood. Day and night, from the tip of my toes to the tip of my hair, fever attacked me. One day, it would make me throw up. The next day, I was delirious. I misunderstood the words and the care my parents were giving me. I misjudged what they were doing. Blame it on pain and my tender age. Fever played with my body the way the little girls in the neighborhood played with their only rag doll. For 6 whole days and nights, I shook. I poured out all the water in my body, stretched out on my mat during the day, and then my little mattress set directly on the floor in the evening. My temperature rose at nightfall. I cried even louder. I called Mama to the rescue. I was impatient, boiling with rage. I hated it when she left me alone, under the veranda, my eyes staring at the aluminium roof. I would cry to the point of exhaustion. Finally, Mama would come. But I no longer found the slightest comfort in the arms of my mother, Zara. She didn't know what to do with me. Do something quick, demanded the little voice that took hold of her during those moments of panic. Then what? Then she would entrust the little bag of bones and pains I was to whomever would appear before her. Who? Quick, implored the little voice. So she threw me like a vulgar package into my grandmother's arms and into the arms of my paternal aunt, Daibo, who was my mother's age, or into the lap of a passing maid, then into the lap of another woman, an aunt, a relative, or a maid, or even a neighbor, or some matron who had come to say hello to grandma. I was passed like this from arm to arm, from breast to breast, but I kept on crying, from pain, from anger, out of habit too.
Why Do You Dance When You Walk by Abdourahman Waberi, translated by Nicola and David Bell, is published by Cassava Republic Press. It is available online, or even better, you can order it from your local independent bookseller. To find your nearest store, visit booksellers.org.uk/bookshop search. This podcast is brought to you by Book Blast. For more bookishness between episodes, visit online journal The Book Blast Diary or find us on Twitter @BookBlast. Special thanks to author Abdourahman Waberi and to Rhoda at Cassava Press for reading the extract in English. And thank you all for listening to this week's episode of the Book Blast podcast.